Your hand is already moving. You didn't decide to pick it up. You're in the middle of something, a conversation, a task, a moment that was almost quiet, and your hand has already crossed the distance to your phone. The screen lights up. There's nothing there. No message, no notification, nothing you were waiting for. You put it down. A few minutes pass, maybe less. Your hand moves again, not because something changed, because the pull arrived again, quiet and reliable, and your hand answered it before you did. You don't remember deciding that either. The obvious explanation is boredom. You've told yourself that. Most people do. I'm just restless. It's a bad habit. I'm probably a bit addicted. And honestly, that sounds right. It feels like a self-aware, reasonable thing to admit. The kind of honesty that closes the question before it fully opens. But something doesn't quite fit. Boredom is passive. You sit with it, wait it out, find something else. You don't have to manage boredom. It passes on its own. This isn't passive. This feels more like a pull, like checking is something that needs to happen, not something you drift into when nothing else is available. That's a small difference, but it matters. In 1948, a psychologist named B.F. Skinner put a pigeon in a box. The box had a lever. Press the lever, get a food pellet. Reliable, simple, predictable. Then Skinner changed the rule. The pellet didn't arrive every time. It arrived sometimes on no schedule the pigeon could learn or anticipate. What happened next surprised everyone. The pigeon pressed the lever more, not less. The uncertainty didn't discourage the behavior. It intensified it. A guaranteed reward produced a predictable response. An unpredictable reward produced something closer to compulsion. Skinner called it variable ratio reinforcement. For decades, it stayed where it was found, a finding about pigeons, levers, and pellets, published in an academic journal and largely ignored outside the laboratory. It wouldn't stay there. By the early 2000s, the architects of the first social platforms had a specific problem. Getting people to sign up was easy. Getting them to come back and keep coming back and return again after that was not. A platform that reliably delivered what you came for was used and put down. What the early engagement researchers needed was something that drove return visits, not because of what was there, but because of what might be. They found the answer in behavioral psychology, deliberately. The question being asked inside product teams was precise. What schedules of reward produce the most persistent behavior in humans? The answer was already 60 years old. Notifications were redesigned first. Where alerts had arrived on a predictable schedule, they were restructured to arrive unpredictably, at intervals no user could learn or anticipate. The irregularity wasn't a flaw, it was the design. Then came the scroll. In 2006, a designer named Causa built Infinite Scroll, the feature that removes the bottom of a feed, letting content appear continuously as you pull down. The gesture was deliberate. Pull down, release, wait. The same motion as a slot machine lever. Raskin didn't offer that comparison as a compliment. He has since called Infinite Scroll his greatest regret and estimated that it cost humanity approximately 200,000 hours of collective attention every single day. But here is the part that changes everything. The part that makes the phone checking feel less like a personal failing and more like a mechanism working exactly as intended. Facebook's internal researchers compared two versions of the feed. One was chronological. Posts arrived in the order they were posted. Predictable, reliable. You knew roughly what to expect. The other was algorithmic, constantly shifting, its logic never quite legible, the next item always uncertain. The algorithmic feed produced more checking, more opening, more returning, not because it was more useful, because it was less predictable. The decision was made to keep the feed uncertain, to build unpredictability into the architecture, because unpredictability, as Skinner had noted in 1948, produces more persistent behavior than any fixed reward ever could. Every major platform in your pocket now runs on this principle. The schedule Skinner discovered in a pigeon is the architecture underneath every app competing for your attention. Here is the thing nobody quite says out loud. Your phone is not a communication tool that became addictive. It's a slot machine that also makes calls. The checking isn't a symptom of weak will. It isn't boredom expressing itself. The behavior is being produced in you by a specific mechanism borrowed from a behavioral laboratory and scaled across billions of devices. Your hand reached before you decided to. That was the point. There's something worth sitting with here. The things we experience as personal habits are sometimes designed responses. The guilt you've carried about your screen time, the mild, familiar sense that you should have more willpower, was never quite about willpower. You were targeted, with precision, by people who understood exactly how the mechanism worked. Knowing this doesn't make you immune. Your hand will reach again. The pull doesn't disappear when you name it. But it changes what the reaching means. The next time your hand moves before your mind does, you'll know whose design that is. And that is where something new can begin. If this changed how one familiar moment looks, there's another worth examining. Next, why waiting always feels longer than it actually is. Another hidden mechanism, another thing your brain does quietly, without asking. Subscribe if you want to keep seeing what's underneath the things you already live through.